Hi class. Today we're beginning Unit 2, Supply and Demand. So for today's lesson, our learning goals are to know how to make and graph supply and demand, be able to interpret supply and demand data, and understand the laws of supply and demand and equilibrium point. Our success criteria is to ensure that we're doing in-class display of work and the complete review and homework. So, demand and supply, supply and demand. Where does this all come from? Where do we start from? We need to start from our basics of what is an economy. An economy, as you should know, you've just done your previous test, is a self-sustaining system in which many independent transactions in a society create distinct flows of money and products. Okay? And so, we're talking about transactions where someone buys and someone sells stuff or services. Okay, that's in contrast, or it's different than a market. A marketplace is a place for commerce. It's where a network of buyers and sellers meet. Okay, and so the economy is the place, is the system, I should say, where transactions happen. The market is the place where the transaction will happen, the network of the buyers who have the money to buy a product and the sellers who have the stuff to sell for that money. And this place is where prices are determined. Okay? And so just to be sure, we don't want to confuse the difference between a market and an economy. So make sure that there are two independent thoughts. Markets are within economies, but are not economies within themselves. So let's get to what we're really talking about here. So question is, what determines market price? Okay, and so you need to think about, why does this thing cost that much money? Why does chocolate milk in the cafeteria cost what it does? Why does a coffee at McDonald's cost what it does? Right? So various things will determine price. And so those things are, one, how much of it exists, the supply of it, and two, how much someone will pay for it, or how much does that person want it, or how much does this community or this economy or this group of people want this thing, and that is demand. So how much there is and how much or how many people want. Okay, so that's what brings us, that's the title of this lesson. So the next question you want to ask is, if this is how prices are determined, is there a consensus? Right, so we're talking about suppliers, supply, and demanders, which is demand. So is there a consensus price where buyers and sellers meet, right? Is there an agreed upon price for chocolate milk? Is there an agreed upon price for coffee? Is there an agreed upon price for gasoline? And so some of you might go downstairs and say, oh, that's too expensive. Or some of you might think, oh, that's too cheap, right? What do those two words mean, too expensive or too cheap? Does that mean that you're not agreeing with the price? When in fact, if you actually make the purchase, you are agreeing. Right? Even if you complain all day and say, oh, that was way too expensive, the fact that you bought it indicates that you agreed to buy it and that you've met consensus with the seller. In the same token, the seller might complain, oh, I'm giving you too good of a deal or whatnot, but they agreed on the deal, so therefore it was advantageous for them to make the deal, therefore you have agreed on that price. And so let's figure out, what is this demand that we're talking about and what is the supply that we're talking about? So demand first. The quantity of a good or service that buyers are willing to purchase at various prices during a given time period, right? So if we think about demand, we need to think about three main things. One is quantity, or how much of this thing, this good or service, so quantity is underlined and bolded, that buyers will purchase at various prices. So this is not a single individual price. Demand is a spectrum of ranges of prices during a given time period, right? So we're talking about this is demand in this moment, okay? So demand changes from moment to moment, but demand has various prices that we think about within the same thought and various quantities that we think about in the same thought. So it's very important that all three of these pieces are part of your definition of demand. You cannot have demand without all three of these things being satisfied. And so the law of demand states this: the quantity demanded varies inversely with price. Okay, so if we remember from our first unit, we talked about relationships between the x-axis and the y-axis, or the x variable and the y variable. In demand, or the law of demand, quantity, this variable, varies inversely with this variable, right? So if prices go up, quantity demanded will go down. And so that's an inverse relationship, okay, or a negative relationship. That is the law of demand. So let's look at some more information about demand. So if we said that prices rise or fall, so we talked about prices and inverse, what's going to happen? So there's the substitution effect, where we'll buy more or less of a specific brand because prices rise or fall, right? So for example, if I have Coca-Cola and Pepsi, if Pepsi goes up in price, I'm more likely to substitute out of Pepsi into Coca-Cola, right? So I'm buying more or less of a specific brand, okay? That's the substitution effect when prices rise and fall. The second substitution effect is this, the income effect. I buy more or less of everything. So if I have a static number for income, and I buy, say I buy some sort of meat product, right? But if the price of meat drops, then I have more wealth. I have more disposable income now, so then I can theoretically buy more of everything. Or like right now, prices of meat have gone up quite a bit, and so prices of meat is more expensive, and therefore when I still want to buy meat, I have to buy meat still. I have less money for everything else, and therefore I can buy less of everything. So that's the income effect, how that impacts demand and supply, right? So the next thing we're talking about is supply. So hopefully we have a decent understanding of what demand is. And so to understand the other side of the story is the supplier, or whoever's supplying the product or the service. And very similarly to demand, supply is also about quantity of a good or service that suppliers are willing to supply, again, at various prices during a given time period. So the same three variables, the same three things apply for the definition of supply. So make sure you understand all 3 points. In the law of supply, similarly, the quantity supplied will increase if prices increase. So this is a positive relationship, right? So if prices go up in the marketplace, suppliers are willing to supply or have a more quantity supplied of that thing. Why? Because they're going to make more money on it. And so they've said, oh, I'll sell more if I can, right? So that is the law of supply, okay? So let's take a look at more detailed on what do these two things mean or look like. So here's demand. So I want you to copy out these values. So you have prices of shirts, and then you have number of shirts that consumers will buy. And so this is what I mean when I said that at various prices. What's the quantity that people will buy at various prices, right? So if shirts were $20, the consumer is likely to want to buy 4, okay? If the prices of shirts is $24, they're going to want to buy 3. If it's $28, they're going to want to buy 2. If it's $32, they're going to want to buy 1. And if it's $36, they're going to want to buy none. Okay? All of this is demand. This is not just one piece. Not just one of them is demand. So remember, it's the quantity that consumers are willing to buy at various prices in a specific time period, in this one specific moment. So please take the time, pause the video, and take the time to graph these values. Okay, so you should graph each of these as coordinate points. Prices should be on the y-axis, and quantity should be on the x-axis. Okay? So now you should be done drawing and graphing this graph. So let's take a look at what it should look like. It should look like this, right? At $36, people will buy 0 shirts. At $32, they'll buy 1. At $28, at $28, they'll buy 2. At $24, they'll buy 3. And at $20, they'll buy 4. This is how you graph demand. Okay, so demand is not one single point. Demand is this entire curve. It's a straight line, I know, but it's called a curve. Demand is all of this. All of this tells you about your behavior, or tells you about someone else's behavior. If the price is this much, they're willing to buy this many. If the price is this much, they're willing to buy this many. All of this is true in any given moment. They're just reacting to a change in prices. And so when you graph demand, ensure you label it D. Okay? Next is supply. So same thing. I'm going to use the same values for prices. So again, it's the quantity that suppliers are willing to sell at various prices given a specific time period. Okay? So if prices of shirts are $20, suppliers think, you know what? It's not worth it for me to sell any, so I'm not going to sell any shirts. If prices were $24, you know what? I'll sell a shirt at $24. Prices are $28, I'll sell 2 shirts. Prices are $32, I'll sell 3 shirts. Prices are $36, I'll sell 4 shirts. So now hopefully you can see that the suppliers are also reacting to price. They're saying, if prices go higher, I'm willing to put in more effort to sell more shirts, right? Because I'm going to make more money. It's worth my while to sell 4 shirts at $36 each. Okay, so now pause the video and graph these points. Again, quantity on the x-axis, prices on the y-axis. Okay, so you should have finished graphing your supply curve, and so let's see what it looks like. Again, at $20, they'll want to say 0, sell 0. At 24, they'll want to say 1. At 32, they'll want to sell 2. At 38, they'll want to sell 3. At 34, they'll want to sell 3. 32. At 32, they'll want to sell 3. And at 36, they'll want to sell 4. Okay? So this is the supply curve. Again, it is a curve of different possibilities, at different preferences, right? At given prices, those companies are willing to sell this many shirts. And again, you want to label supply curve with S. So the next thing to do is to graph them both on the same curve, right? So now I use the same prices and I want to graph demand, how many consumers will buy, and supply, how much suppliers will sell on the same graph. And so this way, we'll get to see a certain point. So if you look at this chart right now, can you already make a conclusion? Okay, you can see at $20, consumers want to buy 4, but suppliers will want to sell none. So it's like, okay, nothing's going to happen here. At $24, consumers will want to buy 3, but suppliers will only want to sell 1. So one consumer might get 1 shirt, but then what else happens? Okay, at $28, consumers want to buy 2, suppliers want to sell 2, so that looks like it matches up nicely. $32, one consumer will want to buy, sellers will want to sell 3, and at $36, no consumer will buy, but sellers want to sell 4. So let's have 4 shirts and no one to sell it to. Okay, so let's look at what this looks like on a graph. So here we have demand and we have supply. Okay, so this is a nice simple solution to the question, what's the price and what's the quantity, right? We know there's lots of different price possibilities. We know there's lots of different quantity possibilities, but ultimately in this marketplace, what's going to happen? We're going to meet at equilibrium. Equilibrium is where price and quantity is set. Equilibrium is where supply and demand meet. So at this point, at $28, they're going to sell 2 shirts, right? $28, consumers buy 2, suppliers sell 2. And so we are at equilibrium, and there will be an agreement or a consensus of price at $28 and with 2 shirts. So let's just take a look for a minute at what would happen. See, if you look up here at $36, suppliers supply 4 shirts. Consumers will buy none. And so there's a huge surplus of quantity here. There's a 4 surplus, right? So nothing will get sold at that price. In the same token, at $20, demanders want to buy shirts, but suppliers say, you know what? We're not going to sell any shirts. And so there's a large shortage in this scenario at $20. And even at each of these other points at $24, suppliers only have 1 shirt at $24, right? But at $24, demanders want 3 shirts. And so what's going to happen, right? So 1 shirt's there, but there's three people who want it perhaps. And so they say, you know what? I want it for 24. And they all bid for 24. And if there's a shortage, ultimately prices are going to get bid up. And so there's going to be upward pressure on prices. Ultimately, supplier can just charge more money. And soon the supplier realizes, you know what, I can just make another shirt and I can sell another shirt at $26. $28. I can sell another shirt at $28 and I'll sell two shirts. And at $28, one of those people demanding a shirt is going to drop out. And now we have two people wanting a shirt and suppliers having two shirts to sell, and then we have consensus equilibrium price. Okay, so in short, that's how supply and demand work. We'll talk more in depth to some changes, some difficulties, and some more problematic things in the next lesson, but that's a very quick primer introduction lesson to supply and demand. Thank you.